So firstly I need to thank Daniel Walters, Ellis Jones, Lil Cole and Tacker Code for this recommendation. I hope I've done this case justice. I also want to thank all of you for your support. I will give my members a special shout out next week. Anyway, on with the video. On the 1st of July 2010, 37-year-old Raoul Moat was released from prison and he was looking for revenge. This 6'3", 17-stone man, who had a history of violence against women and children, was determined to punish his ex-girlfriend, Samantha Stobbart, for refusing to continue to be his punching bag, by killing her and her new partner Chris Brown. Within 48 hours of his release, Chris was shot dead and Samantha was seriously injured. Moat later contacted 999 to declare war on the police, with this being part of that deranged call.
You've got too much from me. You'll get your chance to kill us, right? You'll get your chance to kill us.
No, we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that.
You do want me to kill myself, but I'm going to give you a chance, because I am hunting for officers now.
12 minutes after putting down the phone, he shot PC David Rathband in his patrol car, blinding him. After a week-long manhunt, the life of Raoul Moat ended in a field outside the town of Rothbury in Northumberland. Despite the absolute evil and depravity of Moat, he was to some a hero, adding another dimension of horror to this case. This video is a deep dive into the case of a violent narcissist who, in rambling notes to the police, described himself as a, quote, killer and a maniac. Welcome to Evil Among Us. Raoul Thomas Moat was born on the 17th of June 1973 in Newcastle, a city in northeast England. He was the son of Josephine Moat and Peter Blake, and he was born into an already chaotic environment. Around 18 months before his birth, Peter, who was born in Birmingham, a graduate of the London School of Economics and who worked for the local council, met Josephine, who was working as a draftswoman, which is a job which involves the preparation of detailed drawings of machinery, equipment or buildings. Josephine already had a son from a previous relationship called Angus, but she said that his father had no contact with the child, but never explained why. The relationship moved quickly, and within weeks, Josephine and Peter were living together. However, around 8 months into the relationship, Josephine began displaying bizarre behaviour. She became erratic, but would then spend days in bed, crippled by depression. Her physical appearance and the condition of the home began to deteriorate, and she was neglecting Angus. Peter insisted that Josephine go to the doctor, and it was here she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and it appeared she'd been suffering from this for years. Bipolar disorder is a serious mental health condition that causes extreme mood swings. A person can go from experiencing manic and emotional highs to a crippling depression in a matter of hours or spread over days and weeks. Delusions are also a common feature of this disorder. Josephine was given medication, but quickly decided that she didn't want to take this, and her mood swings became far worse. On one occasion, Josephine convinced herself that the home she shared with Peter was haunted, and so she packed up her and Angus's belongings and moved back in with her mother in Felton, West London. Peter came home to find an empty house, but eventually tracked his girlfriend down. Peter, it seems, was smitten with Josephine and moved to Felton, renting a property nearby, as the pair began to rebuild their relationship. However, in January 1973, without warning, Josephine said that she never wanted to see Peter again. Peter was devastated and wrote letters to Josephine trying to reconcile. She didn't respond, and eventually, after a few months, he gave up. Around 6 months later, in July 1973, Peter received a letter from Josephine's sister telling him that she'd had a son, his son. Peter was shocked. He had no idea that Josephine was pregnant. He went to her mother's house, banging on the door, but there was no answer. Soon, he got a letter from a solicitor telling him that he was to stay away from Josephine, Angus, and his newborn son, who, through a third party, he found was called Raoul. Peter tried desperately to get in contact with his son, and even hung around the Newcastle area for several years, hoping that he would bump into Josephine and catch a moment with his son. However, this never happened. Peter eventually moved to London, got married, and had a family. He did try to reach out several times, including leaving his contact details if Josephine needed financial support, but he never met his son, and like the rest of the country, read about his life, death and crimes in the newspapers. It appears very unlikely that Josephine hearing that she had bipolar disorder whilst with Peter was the first time that she was made aware of this diagnosis. It appears that she'd previously been medicated, stopped taking this, and had then banned Angus's father from seeing him. So both children were in a household with a mother who was clearly mentally unwell, and the impact on Moat would be devastating. Moat didn't know anything about Peter, not even his name. Josephine ignored him when he asked about him, but even worse, she claimed that his father had abandoned him before his birth. Eventually, Moat found his birth certificate with no name written where the father was supposed to be listed. Moat was bullied in school due to not having a father, and in order to cope with this, he would tell himself and others stories about his father having been a loving man who adored him, but had to leave the family home in order to protect him and his mother. Moat and his brother Angus were raised predominantly by their grandmother, and she gave some balance in their lives, but she couldn't shield them entirely from their mother's bizarre behaviour. Josephine would neglect the boys, but would then sit them down and tell them that, quote, they are the chosen ones and they belong to the royal family, or tell them, don't be sad, because the devil doesn't want you to be sad. On one occasion, she sat both boys down and made them watch her burn their toys. Other times, when they were meant to be spending time with their mother, she would disappear entirely or be lying in bed, refusing to get up. The environment that Moat grew up in shaped the monster that he would become. He was raised to believe that his father abandoned him, that he was unloved, and he was raised by a mother who, due to her own mental illness, is unlikely to have given him any form of stable upbringing. She would also abuse the children, burning their toys, but then also implanting in their head the idea that they were special, better than everyone else. These statements of grandiosity from his mother would have enabled Moat to build a shell around himself to conceal what was truly at his core, a deeply unhappy, insecure child. This metaphorical shell would be represented later physically with muscle, all a way to deflect from how terrified this man was of being abandoned, of being alone. However, before he could hit the gym, like so many others that I've covered on this channel, he resorted to hurting animals. It's reported that Moat killed both cats and dogs when he was a child. He also resorted to arson. Setting fire to things made him feel powerful. This began when he was around 8 years old, when Moat burned down a local newsagent's. He also set fire to property at his school, Stockfield Avenue Primary. When Moat was 11 and Angus was 14, Josephine began a relationship with a man called Brian Healy, who quickly became their stepfather. Whilst he got on with Angus, Brian appeared to dislike Moat and treated him with contempt. Around this same time, the only person who had shown Moat any sort of love and attention, his grandmother, died. Something seemed to switch in Raoul Moat's mind after this point. He became cold, distant, and his violence began escalating. This is a tale of two brothers. Angus Moat, who also had a terrible upbringing, did well in school, went to university, and eventually gained a master's degree, before going on to have a career in tax. Raoul Moat, however, became consumed by his anger, his insecurities, and his victimhood. He was undoubtedly a victim during his childhood, but he became fixated on seeing himself as the one who was wronged throughout the rest of his life, and this, in his mind, gave him permission to treat anyone in any way that he wanted. Everything was someone else's fault. By the time he was in his early teens, Raoul Moat was already a dangerous and unpredictable individual who was obsessed with power and control, and he wanted to be able to physically dominate everyone he came into contact with. When Raoul Moat was around 16 or 17 years old, he began taking karate lessons, and he became more muscular. He found that things began to change. He would get more attention from women, but also people were more cautious around him, appearing to know that he could physically overwhelm them in a fight. Moat liked this attention. Around this same time, he became friends with a group of bodybuilders who introduced him to steroids, and he quickly began taking them. This wasn't occasional use. Moat was pumping himself full of this drug, all in order to get as big as possible, as quickly as possible, and by his early 20s, he stood at 6'3" tall, weighing 17 stone, or around 240 pounds. Moat's temper became more explosive, and he would victimise anyone around him, knowing they couldn't fight back. He would stare at random people and say things like, "What are you looking at?" enjoying seeing the fear in their eyes. This was likely for two reasons. Firstly, it's widely believed that the increase in testosterone from using steroids raises aggression levels. But also, Raoul Moat was now in a position where he could victimise others. He was not a weak little child who could be pushed around and forgotten. He was a man mountain. He was going to wield the control he lacked all of his early life. Due to his behaviour, Moat could not hold down a job. He worked for a short time as a milkman, a tree surgeon, and a mechanic, but there was always conflict, always him squaring up to someone, or simply not turning up, and he would be fired. However, it was always someone else's fault. By this point, Moat's steroid use was out of control, and he found employment as a nightclub bouncer, which he loved, as it gave him an outlet for his violent urges, and met his need to dominate and control others. This also brought him into contact with criminals who would later help him in his crimes. Raoul Moat had made what found him happy, what made him feel more of a man, controlling everyone and everything in his life. Fear was the answer, and he would soon direct his violence and aggression towards women, but also children, who he would humiliate and brutalise mercilessly. It's clear that Raoul Moat hated women, and this was likely due to his relationship with his mother Josephine, and because of his size and sense of entitlement, he felt he could do whatever he wanted to women he knew, and even complete strangers, and that they fully deserved this abuse. In approximately the mid-90s, so when Moat himself was in his early 20s, he would sometimes humiliate women in the street. On one occasion, he came across an 18-year-old woman at a bus stop in Newcastle. She had no idea who Moat was, but he forced a jester's hat onto her head and handed her a sign which said, quote, "I've been naughty," which he told her to put around her neck. The fact he was walking around with these things is concerning enough, but Moat then began laughing hysterically at this woman while she stood there humiliated. The woman simply suffered the abuse, fearful of the 6'3" stranger who had a, quote, "crazed look in his eyes," before he eventually wandered off. This was nothing compared to how Moat would treat women behind closed doors. In 1997, when he was 24, Moat met an 18-year-old woman called Caroline Dodd, who was a single mother to 2 children. After just 2 months of seeing each other, Moat proposed to Caroline, and the pair, along with the children, moved into a 3-bedroom house in Newcastle. For this short time, Moat had been able to pretend to be a loving boyfriend and someone who doted on the children. But when they moved in together, the mask fell away. Caroline was a prisoner in the home. Raoul Moat would beat her for no reason, and the assaults would be especially savage if he suspected, even with no evidence, that she'd been looking at another man. Caroline was also repeatedly raped by Moat. On Christmas Eve of 1997, Caroline refused to cook for Moat, and he flew into a rage and began choking her until she lost consciousness. They had a friend round, and luckily he stepped in and likely saved Caroline's life. This was the last straw. With the help of her family, Caroline left Moat, but a few days later found out she was pregnant. She decided to tell him about the pregnancy, but instantly regretted her decision. Moat demanded that Caroline get an abortion, and when she refused, he told her, quote, "I know 2 girls who can kick the baby out of you." He then threw a fridge freezer at her. Caroline called the police and was able to get a restraining order. She was given emergency housing by the council, which, unbelievably, was just 100 metres away from where Raoul Moat lived. He breached a restraining order repeatedly and continued threatening Caroline, her 2 children, and his unborn child. Eventually, Caroline gave birth to a daughter, Caitlin, who never met Moat, as he made it clear that he didn't want anything to do with her. It was only when she was 7 years old that she found out that he was her father. The first time she heard his voice was when his deranged calls to the police were played on the national news. Raoul Moat then moved on to a woman called Marissa Reed, who was 19 years old at the time, and the pair met when they were set up on a blind date. Marissa later described meeting Moat, quote, "I met Raoul when I was 19. I was impressed with his physique. all those muscles. It was a blind date arranged by my sister, and he was a true gent at first, and kissed me on the cheek when we said goodbye. For the first 6 months, it was the honeymoon period, and everything was great. He was very charming, a gentle giant, or so I thought. Then one night, he told me, "You're mine now. I own you." But Raoul Moat meant it. He treated Marissa as his possession. On one occasion, he beat a man unconscious in a club when he spoke to Marissa. After this, he then drove the pair home and told Marissa, quote, "If you want to be a slag, I'll treat you like one," before tying her to the bed and raping her. Marissa described another savage assault when Moat demanded sex. She said, quote, "When I said no, I was too tired, he got angry, dragged me into the living room, pushed me into the wall face first, grabbed my hair and smashed my head off his knee. He then threw me on the floor. He got a baseball bat and pressed it against my throat. I was struggling to breathe, but somehow I found the strength to put it slightly away from my windpipe. His face was horrible, screwed up and twisted with anger. He was trying to kill me. I tried to crawl away, and he picked the bat up again and smashed it across my spine. I was petrified. I thought I was going to die, and begged him to stop. He picked me up off the floor by my neck, and then started squeezing. I passed out, and he dropped me. Marissa was able to stumble into the street and was seen by a passer-by, and she was saved. She was beaten to a pulp and made a statement to the police, but he used his friends to put pressure on her to withdraw her complaint, which, due to fear, she did. Moat visited Marissa in the hospital, and when he saw her, he stood and laughed and said that she looked like boxer Frank Bruno. The emotional and physical abuse carried on for 8 years. Marissa was, like other women, forced to get a tattoo with Moat's name on it, and she was forced to inject him with steroids and measure his arms whilst complimenting him on his physique. During the relationship, Moat and Marissa had 2 children, including a daughter called Chantel, who later told the press, quote, "My father has always been a monster. That is all I've ever known him as. When I was young, there was no monster under my bed. He slept next door to me. He made me cut the front garden with scissors until I had blisters on my fingers. He wouldn't let me have any water, so I was drinking from the gutter. He used to threaten to feed me to his piranhas he kept in a tank. I think he starved me. I had to eat toast out of school bins or off the floor. We were scared of him, terrified. He had a samurai sword, crossbow, and a shotgun or pistol under his bed." Chantel recalled being regularly assaulted by her father, and on one occasion tied to a chair overnight for apparently stealing food. Whilst Moat would beat Marissa for even looking at another man, all during their relationship, he was sleeping with multiple women and underage girls. Marissa found a diary where he documented all of his sexual conquests. After this, Marissa was able to escape the relationship, but Moat would continue to subject her to years of mental torture. In 2006, he kidnapped both children. The police were called, but Marissa was told that Moat was their father, and he had every right to spend time with them. Moat then coached the children, using threats of violence, to have them convey false stories of abuse to social services. This was so successful that he was given full custody, and Marissa was only given visitation rights at the weekends. Moat also tried to get Marissa prosecuted, but the police were able to see through the coaching that the children had been through. They stayed with Moat for several years, enduring more abuse. Whilst Raoul Moat was punishing Marissa for daring to leave him, he was of course free to do whatever he wanted, and in 2004 he was set up on a blind date with a woman called Samantha Stobbart. Well, I say woman, she was a child, being just 16 years old, whilst Moat was 31. She fit his victim profile perfectly. She was petite and naive. He knew he could dominate her physically and mentally. Following his typical pattern, he love-bombed Samantha, and the relationship moved quickly, with the pair living together within weeks. Behind closed doors, Samantha endured emotional, physical and sexual violence for 6 years. For much of this time, his 2 children, who he was using to continue to abuse Marissa Reed, witnessed the violence in the home, further scarring them. This relationship produced another child, a girl called Chanel, who was born in around 2008. This makes 4 children I've mentioned. However, it's believed that Raoul Moat actually fathered at least 6, never bothering with any of them unless he could use them to manipulate their mothers. Samantha was regularly threatened with death if she dared to leave her abuser. She was trapped. If she tried to escape, he would have killed her. Moat was still abusing steroids, and his paranoia was off the charts. He was also rubbing shoulders with the criminal fraternity in Newcastle, which meant that he had easy access to weapons. The combination of these 2 things led to terrifying experiences which Samantha had to live through. On one occasion in 2009, the year before his rampage, Samantha wrote on Facebook that she was going out with friends. Moat convinced himself this meant that she was cheating on him. He then stormed round to Samantha's grandmother's house, where she'd gone with their daughter Chanel, waving a gun around and claiming there was a man in the house and Samantha was sleeping with him. The door was shut, and Samantha was forced to talk to Moat on the phone for around 2 hours whilst he paced up and down the street. By this point, Raoul Moat was well known to the police. He'd been arrested numerous times for domestic abuse, although I believe he was only convicted once or twice, but he'd also run foul of the law for weapons and driving offences. On one occasion, Moat was pulled over in a van he was driving uninsured, and in the boot, the police found a samurai sword, and a serrated knuckle duster was found hidden in the vehicle. Moat would tell anyone and everyone, quote, "I hate pigs." He was convinced the police had a vendetta against him and would not leave him alone. Again, this is the narcissism and self-pitying nature of this man. He was arrested because he committed crimes, but he was the perpetual victim. In his mind, every single officer was focused on him. He was that important. Moat's hatred of the police only increased in 2009 when he was arrested after assaulting his daughter Chantal when she was just 9 years old. On this occasion, Chantal had forgotten to wash the school uniforms, and her father threw her on the ground and pinned her down. She was so scared that she wet herself. Chantal showed the bruises to a school counsellor, and they called the police. Raoul Moat was eventually convicted of assaulting his daughter, and in February 2010 he was sentenced to 18 weeks custody and sent to Durham prison. He was filled with rage. He wasn't in prison because he was a coward who'd beaten a child. It was the police's fault. It was the court's fault. Samantha Stobbart felt she was free. With Raoul Moat in prison, she was determined to escape this monster. However, he had no intention of letting her go, and within 48 hours of coming out of prison, he'd be travelling to her location, armed with a sawn-off shotgun, to begin a rampage that would make national headlines. Whilst Raoul Moat was in prison, Samantha Stobbart tried to move on with her life. She and her daughter Chanel moved in with her parents in Birtley, town in Gateshead. One day, there was a knock on the door, and on the other side was 29-year-old Chris Brown, who was going door to door to drum up interest in his karate classes, as he was an instructor and was trying to establish himself in the area. Chris had moved up north from Berkshire for a fresh start around 6 months before his death. He was also a father of 2 children. Samantha and Chris began talking and then dating. It's not exactly clear what he was told about Raoul Moat, but it seems he was determined to try and make things work with Samantha. Unlike Moat, an absolute coward and abuser, Chris Brown appears to have been a decent man. He has been all but forgotten in this saga, and that is a tragedy in itself, because as we'll get to, he died trying to protect Samantha. It was in a letter that Samantha told Moat that they were over and she was seeing someone else. She also claimed that her new partner Chris was a police officer. It's obvious what Samantha was trying to do. She was trying to intimidate Moat to get him to back off, and this was like a red rag to a bull and galvanised his hatred of police. One of the pigs had taken his property. Unfortunately, while Samantha was getting to know Chris and going out on dates, believing that she was now free, she was being watched. Raoul Moat had contacted one of his friends, 26-year-old Carl Ness, a man who was later reported to be a loner who idolised Moat. He was tasked with following Samantha and also researching her new partner online. Ness was also instructed to make contact with a third party to source a weapon for Moat, specifically a sawn-off shotgun, which he was going to use to kill Samantha and Chris. Raoul Moat was released on the morning of Thursday, July the 1st, 2010, and began putting his plan in motion. Moat then met with Carl Ness to get hold of the shotgun and to gather final details on Samantha and Chris's movements. On Friday the 2nd of July, staff from Durham Prison called Northumberland police. It appeared that Moat had been very vocal to other prisoners about the fact he was going to kill his ex-girlfriend and a new partner, so it was felt the authorities needed to be notified to take action. However, nothing happened, and this would be a fatal mistake. But around this same time, Moat was on Facebook, posting pathetic, self-pitying messages, including, quote, "Lost my business, kids to social services, gonna lose my home, and lost my missus of nearly 6 years to a copper. Like they haven't fucked my life enough over the years." That evening, Chris Brown and Samantha Stobbart went out for a drink in Gateshead, unaware they were being stalked. They then returned to a property in Birtley. Reports differ as to whose property this was. Some say this was Samantha's parents' home, but it appears more likely this was the neighbour's house where the couple had gone to have a drink with some friends. At around 1 a.m. on Saturday the 3rd of July, a stolen white transit van pulled up at the end of the road. Inside was Raoul Moat, shotgun in hand, and behind the wheel was Carl Ness. Moat got out and skulked towards the property, hiding in some shrubs just underneath an open window. It needs to be pointed out here that after he went on the run, Raoul Moat wrote a 49-page long self-pitying note which he gave to a friend of his to deliver to the police, in which he described his crimes, so I'll use his words to say what happened next. As we go along, I will point out the falsehoods, contradictions, and his continuous attempts to portray himself as a victim despite his horrific crimes. So Moat wrote that he hid in the shrubbery for, quote, "an hour and a half. I listened to them mocking me. It was hurtful listening to Sam, especially after nearly 6 years. They had opened a window and I could hear everything. If I was ever going to back down, listening to them stopped that." So again, this is Moat's narcissism and victim blaming on full display. It's likely there was mention of him, but in his mind, the only person who mattered was him, so of course the only subject that Sam and the others were discussing would be him, and he was in two minds about what he was going to do, but because they were being mean to him, he had to go through with it. He then continued, quote, "At 2:30 a.m. they came out. I shot him in the chest and he ran off. Sam screamed and tried to stop me as I gave chase. I fired the second and he went down. I pointed the gun at Sam to chase her and she ran off. I reloaded 2 customized rounds. Sam's was half the powder with small gauge pellets. With a superficial injury, she would get a massive compensation payout, inadvertently providing for her when I'm gone. And there would be small scarring, reminding her not to ever do this to anyone again. How could she have done this to me? I put the 3rd round into his head and went to the window and fired at Sam. It hit, but she seemed okay, but I paused to be sure. She crawled to the kitchen quickly and hid behind the door. I looked around for someone else to shoot. There was no one. Looked back at Sam, went to shoot myself, then changed my mind. It's like the Hulk. It takes over, and it's more than anger, and it happens only when I'm hurt, and this time I was really hurt. What actually happened was that Raoul Moat pointed the shotgun at Samantha, and Chris instinctively stepped in front of her, inevitably saving her life. He was then executed with a shotgun blast to the head. Most delusional ramblings continued, quote, "Those doctors better save her, or I'll hit that hospital. I still love her despite everything, but my head is a mess right now, and I know I'm too far gone to make much sense of it. I guess I finally lost it. I'm on the run. I'll keep killing police until I'm dead. They've hunted me for years. Now it's my turn. I'm very sorry about Sam. I wish I hadn't shot at her. Just make sure she stays alive. I never cheated on her. I wish she hadn't on me. She pulled the trigger by doing so just as much as me." He added, "I'm a killer and a maniac, but I ain't no coward. I was terrified of losing Sam, as I knew I'd lose the plot." I don't even know where to start with this. I mean, what the hell was wrong with this man? He was utterly delusional. He didn't mean to hurt Sam, but fired a shotgun at her. But after doing this, he checked that she was okay. He writes as though he was doing her a favour, Now she can get a nice compensation claim. And after shooting Samantha, it was the hospital staff that were at fault if she died. And if she did, he would go on a rampage in the hospital, killing innocent doctors and nurses, because of the consequences of what he did. And he ends this part of his note by claiming that he never cheated on her, which is bullshit, and stating that Samantha essentially pulled the trigger because she was unfaithful to him, i.e. she dared to move on with her life. Again, showing his utter disconnect from reality, in the letter he claims that he didn't assault Samantha, but then clarifies that he means that he never punched her, but he admits that he slapped her, grabbed her, and pushed her. Of course, he leaves out the part where he grabbed her around the throat and strangled her until she lost consciousness, like he'd done to so many women before her. What I've read out also points to the ultimate danger of Raoul Moat. He talks about when he's gone and killing police until he's dead. He was determined to go out in a blaze of glory. This sad little man will kill anyone in order to punish the world as he felt had mistreated him. Samantha Stobbart survived. She was hit in the shoulder and abdomen, and while she recovered in hospital, she was surrounded by armed police officers. Her family were also taken to a safe house, and this happened with Moat's former partners, their families and his children, in case he came after any of them. This was a real possibility, as Raoul Moat had published a hit list on Facebook, which included killing Samantha's family. Writing things on social media, clearly he wanted to get as much attention as possible. This man and the whole situation would be pathetic if it wasn't so serious. However, Raoul Moat was not interested in any of his exes. He wanted to kill police officers, and he began cruising the streets, looking for targets. Just after midnight, on Sunday the 4th of July 2010, Raoul Moat and Carl Ness were in a black Lexus, combing the streets in and around Newcastle, looking for targets, specifically police officers that Moat could kill. Behind the wheel was 23-year-old Khurram Arwan, a man who eagerly became involved in Moat's plot to cause mayhem. At around 12:30 AM, Raoul Moat made the following 999 call to police.
Hello there, this is the gunman from Berkeley last night. My name is Raoul Moat. What I'm phoning about is to tell you exactly why I've done what I've done, right? Now, my girlfriend has been having an affair behind my back with one of your officers, this gentleman that I shot last night, the karate instructor, right? He's been on to me, right, for years. He's hassled us, harassed us, he has just won't leave us alone. I went straight 6 years ago when I met her, and I've tried my best to have a normal life, and you just won't let up, right? You won't leave us alone for 5 minutes. I can't drive down the street without the blue cracking lights, you know? You have stitched us up for years, you've been caught stitching us up. So the fact of the matter is, right, that she's had an affair with one of your officers. Was he not a police officer, I wouldn't have shot him.
Okay.
Simple as that, right? But the thing is, you know, it's been going on for a while. I went to jail, right?
Okay.
I was stitched up by you for hitting your kids, which I didn't do, right?
Right.
I went to jail for something I didn't do. Now, I could have took a community order, right?
Yeah.
But what happened is me and Sam had a discussion with the barrister. I went to jail. Within 3 to 4 weeks, the barrister promised us and let us down. She said she would have us on a retrial, get the not guilty, so me and my son would live together. I went to jail, right?
No, hang on a minute, because you're losing me there, yeah.
Right? Well, I went to jail longer than I should have done for something I didn't do, right? Which justify that in your own head, right? And meanwhile, while I'm doing that for my missus, she's having an affair with one of your officers, right? And then when I come out, right, she's winding us up, saying that he's going to stitch us up using him, right? And, you know, that he's this, he's that, he's going to, because he's a multiple backbelt, he's going to kick the ass all over the place.
Okay,
you know I mean? Right? And I've had nothing but grief from her. I've had a good relationship with her for 6 years, which is why we've stayed together. I've gone straight, I've got a total legitimate life with her. I've opened a business, and I've been shafted. And you police have took too much off me over the years. You won't leave alone. And now you think you can take your missus. Now, I didn't mean to shoot her like that, right?
Okay.
Right? They deserved it, right? But she, right, you can see from the ballistics I've been altering those cartridges, right? That one was only half the powder. It was only meant to get a compensation, because obviously I'm not going to be around in a few days, right? It was meant to just give her a little injury so she could get loads of compensation.
Okay.
For you set the bed. Now that found out just critical, I'm not happy about it. I didn't mean that. You know what I mean? I'm quite surprised she is critical. You know? But I didn't mean that. But the fact of the matter is, I'm not coming in alive. You have hassled me for so many years. Come anywhere near me and I'll kill you. I've got 2 hostages at the minute, right? Come anywhere near me and I'll kill them as well. I'm coming to get you. I'm not on the run. I am coming to get you. You have made me unwell. You have made me do this because you just won't leave me out of, you just won't leave us alone.
Can you confirm you've got 2 hostages?
I'll confirm I've got 2 hostages, yes.
Right. And where are you?
I'm not going to tell you where I am.
Okay, fair enough, yeah.
Get things, don't worry, right?
Yeah. Can I just confirm who you are? Can you give me your date of birth, please?
Yes, it's the 17th of June, 1973.
Right, okay then, thank you very much.
Right, I am very sorry for what's happened with Sam. That's not what I meant.
Right.
You know? But I'll tell you something else. This other idiot in the paper that's saying I pointed the gun, he's had to, he starts having to control him and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
He was accused, right? I heard rumours in jail that he was sleeping with my son. Now, I took the Tom Stark yesterday, and he said he heard the same rumours as well, but he didn't believe it was true, but he was definitely trying to get into it. So listen to me, but I'll tell you, he was the first one to run and hide upstairs, leaving his wife and leaving everybody else. You know what I mean? He didn't stand there and let a gun point at me, because I had a pointed him, I would have shot him, because I do believe he was getting into it. There's been a lot of nonsense going on behind my back while I've been in jail. She's changed. She's not off changed. And every time I spoke to her and tried to be reasonable, she wouldn't let us anywhere near the den.
Right.
She wouldn't go to the house, she wouldn't discuss anything, and she was threatening us for one of your officers.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I've had enough. I've jailed made us unwell, I've came up with different kids. You know what I mean? I've lost everything through you. Right? Just won't leave us alone, right? So at the end of the day, you killed me and him before that trigger was ever pulled.
Right.
You know what I mean?
We are trying to help you, yeah.
You're not trying to help us. You wanted me to do myself in, and I was going to do it until I found out about him properly and what was going on. And as soon as I found out, I thought, no, you've had too much from me. You've had too much from me. You'll get your chance to kill us, right? You'll get your chance to kill us.
No,
okay?
We don't want to do that. We don't want to do that.
You do want me to kill myself, but I'm going to give you a chance, because I am hunting for officers now.
An important thing to point out is that when Moat mentions hostages, he's referring to Ness and Awan. In order to cover themselves from legal consequences, both men had claimed to their family members they'd been taken hostage by Moat and were acting under duress. This was complete bollocks. Around 12 minutes after the 999 call ended, the murderous trio spotted a marked police car at a roundabout at East Denton, to the west of Newcastle. Sat behind the wheel was 42-year-old David Rathband. David had been a police officer since the year 2000 and had been with the traffic department since 2006. He was also trained as a family liaison officer, supporting families that had been bereaved after losing a loved one in a road traffic accident. He was married and had 2 children. David had just sent a reply to a text from his wife telling him to take care when his sixth sense made him aware of someone approaching the car. He then looked over his left shoulder and saw a mountain of a man, Raoul Moat, running as his vehicle, holding a sawn-off shotgun. David had no time to react. From a distance of around 3 feet, Moat fired the first shot through the closed passenger window, and this hit David in the face. David later recalled this moment, quote, "I looked into his eyes and saw nothing, no emotion. Then I felt the pain full on in my face." Moat then fired a second shot, which hit David in the chest. He then ran to the getaway car, which sped away. Moat then got back on the phone to 999 to brag about what he'd done, telling the operator, quote, "I'm absolutely not going to stop. You're going to have to kill me. I'm never going to stop." Moat's note to the police also included his justification for the attempted murder of PC Rathband. He wrote that he shot the officer who was, quote, "sitting there, waiting to bully someone, probably a single mum who couldn't afford her car tax. Rang again and told them they're gonna pay for what they've done to me and Sam. The public need not fear me, but the police should, as I won't stop till I'm dead." Again, the justification is sickening, essentially trying to make his actions akin to some sort of public service. And what was he talking about? What the police did to Sam. He shot her. It appears that David Rathband had had dealings with Moat before, but it's extremely unlikely that he was targeted for this reason, or that Moat even recognised him. He was simply in the wrong place, at the wrong time, wearing a police uniform, and therefore he needed to be executed. David Rathband survived and was rushed to hospital in critical condition. As a result of the attack, he lost his sight, and as we'll get to, his life fell apart, and his story has an extremely tragic ending. Later that same day, Northumbria police held a press conference releasing Raoul Moat's name and warning the public not to approach him and that every resource was being used to track him down. A massive operation then began, with armed officers from forces across the UK being brought in to hunt down their fugitive. This included ones from Cleveland, Humberside, West Yorkshire, South Yorkshire, Cumbria and the Metropolitan Police. The Police Service of Northern Ireland also sent 20 armoured cars to help in the search. An RAF Tornado jet was also brought in to search from the air as it was fitted with thermal imaging technology. By this point, Raoul Moat had left the area heading north. At around 10 PM on Monday the 5th of July, Moat, Ness and Awan were in the village of Seaton Delaval. Moat stormed into a fish and chip shop, levelled the shotgun at the man working behind the counter before demanding money from the till. He was given £100 and then he ran out of the shop. Remember, this was a man who claimed he posed no risk to the public and they had no reason to fear him. The trio then continued north to some land at Wagtail Farm on the outskirts of Rothbury, a town around 40 miles north of Newcastle, and it was here that Moat set up a camp in some woodlands. Whilst he hid out, Carl Ness and Kuramawan were sent out to Rothbury town centre for supplies, being captured on CCTV whilst on their shopping trip. On Tuesday the 7th of July, the police were hot on the trail of Moat and his accomplices. Ness and Awan had been identified and were arrested on this date in dramatic fashion when the police forced the car they were driving to stop and threw stun grenades at the vehicle. Both men reiterated their claim that they had been held hostage and pretended to help the police. They led officers to the campsite, but by this point, Moat had fled. It's believed that he'd relocated to a drain a short distance away. Ness and Awan were both charged with various offences and remanded to prison, so Raoul Moat was now on his own. Officers continued searching, and family members of Moat made appeals for him to give himself up. Even Samantha Stobbart made a plea from her hospital bed, clearly wanting her abusers to be caught and locked up forever so she could finally have some peace. Raoul Moat was able to use the storm drain network to move around, but he would be spotted, and on Friday the 9th of July 2010, the manhunt would come to an end. Moat had been spotted emerging from a manhole cover in the high street in Rothbury. When he realised he'd been seen, he ran away. He was then spotted later that day, stealing tomatoes from an allotment, before scurrying away to his hiding spot. Hundreds of armed officers descended on the area and surrounded the town of Rothbury. Moat then emerged from his hiding place and at around 7:30 PM was spotted lying in a field near the riverbank area of the town with his shotgun pointed under his chin. He was quickly surrounded and police negotiators were called in. They spent the next 6 hours trying to convince this deranged gunman to give himself up. Moat alternated between lying down and sitting up, all the time holding the shotgun to his head. He demanded that the officers shoot him and then rambled on about his hatred of the police. At 1:15 AM on Saturday the 10th of July 2010, a gunshot was heard and Raoul Moat slumped to the floor. This man, who said that he wasn't a coward, had pulled the shotgun trigger and brought his miserable life to an end. Officers approached Moat and an ambulance was called. He was taken to a hospital in Newcastle, where he was declared dead at 2:20 AM. The world was now rid of the monster that was Raoul Thomas Moat. Raoul Moat was dead, but he would continue to cause heartache from beyond the grave, with him claiming his final victim just over 18 months after his pathetic reign of terror had come to an end. His accomplices Carl Ness and Kuramawan were left to face the music. Ness was charged with murdering Chris Brown, conspiracy to murder police officers, the attempted murder of David Rathband, robbery and possession of a firearm. Awan was charged with conspiracy to murder police officers, the attempted murder of David Rathband and robbery. Whilst Raoul Moat was the one who pulled the trigger, both men were charged under joint enterprise. Essentially, they knew exactly what Moat was planning on doing and they were helping him, so they were held accountable for the outcome. Both men pleaded not guilty, and during their trials at Newcastle Crown Court, claimed that Raoul Moat had held them hostage and they were forced to become involved in his crimes. If they hadn't, he would have killed them. One of the key pieces of evidence against them was CCTV footage of the pair walking casually around Rothbury, shopping for Moat whilst he was hiding out. Neither man could give an explanation about their calm demeanour, or why Moat had apparently allowed his hostages to wander around town, or why they hadn't, having apparently escaped his clutches, gone to the police. Both men were convicted and stood to be sentenced on the 15th of March 2011. The judge wasn't messing about. 23-year-old Kura Marwan was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 20 years, and 26-year-old Carl Ness was also given a life sentence, but was not able to apply for parole for 40 years. Alan has another 7 years until he can apply for his freedom. Ness has another 27 years left to serve before he can even be considered for release, by which point he'd be in his mid-60s. David Rathband spent 17 days in hospital after being shot, and then had to begin coming to terms with the fact that he was completely blind. He also had 200 shotgun pellets lodged in his skull. There was a lot of media attention regarding David's plight, and outwardly he appeared positive and even had aspirations of going back to work, although in a far more limited role, as shown by this interview.
Recovery is slow, but good. I'm still fighting with quite a lot of nerve pain and lack of feeling in my face and my jaw. I've had five operations since I was discharged from hospital, to remove shrapnel, and only last week I was taking shrapnel out the top of my head, which would cause me an issue and come out. It is a slow process to full recovery. As we spoke about before, I want to be in a position where I'm as well as I was before, and left blind I can get on then without any medical, other medical restrictions. So I'm not too sure when that will be, but I'm trying my best to do it, and the running helps. It does hurt to run. It makes me feel ill after, but I also feel a lot healthier for it. So hopefully that'll help towards my recovery. Well, I looked to return in April. I'd set my target much earlier than that, but medically I wasn't well enough. April came along. We had the trial beforehand, and it's been very hard to sort of reach those targets. And on reflection, I'm not well enough to return back to work. So, things have been put in a place at work to allow me to return, and they're very fluid as to when I do go back. But I keep setting dates, and I'll readjust them. So now, July, bizarrely, will be the day that I try to get back, the 1st of July, which is my daughter's birthday. And 12 months on, I was putting pink balloons and banners out for my daughter. So that'll be quite upsetting and surreal, I suppose, if I manage to get back then.
His was a story of survival against the odds. However, behind closed doors, David was struggling to cope. He was told that he wouldn't be able to return back to work, and from reports I've read, the force that he'd worked for over a decade was fighting him every step of the way to pay for things he needed to help his recovery, including a cane and dental surgery. Just over 18 months after being shot, on the 29th of February 2012, David Rathband was found dead at his home, and it was determined that his death was self-inflicted. On the 16th of March 2012, his funeral service was held at Stafford Crematorium, attended by his family and fellow officers. David Rathband, as far as I'm concerned, was killed by Raoul Moat. I'll touch on the hero worship of Raoul Moat only briefly, because I'll get too angry and lose my cool, but his veneration whilst he was on the run, and after his death, is a disgusting aspect of this case I have to cover. As a reminder, Raoul Moat killed animals, subjected his partners and even his own children to horrific abuse, and was also a sex offender, forcing himself on his partners and sleeping with apparently many underage girls. However, because he shot a police officer, all of that was apparently forgotten by some idiots in society, and he was, and still is, held up by these people as some sort of anti-hero, rather than the evil monster he was. A quick search of Facebook will bring up various tribute pages to Moat, and from the spelling on most of the posts, the people writing on them seem to lack the sense that God gave goats. There are some truly disturbing posts, such as some people blaming Samantha Stobbart for Moat's actions, perpetuating the perception of him as a poor little victim, and others making pilgrimages to the spot where he died, even replicating how he was lying while surrounded by police. As I said in a previous video, the types of people who think this way are usually those who themselves are criminals, who think they should be allowed to get away with whatever they want. These people often take no responsibility for their actions and hate the police because they hold them accountable, so as far as they're concerned, gunning down unarmed people, simply doing their job, is perfectly acceptable. However, there's also those disturbed people who think that Moat is a hero because he abused women in his life, those who feel that they are second-class citizens and giving them a backhander every now and then is the only way they'll learn. I would have been curious if these same Muppets would have still called Raoul Moat a legend and a hero if he'd slept with their underage daughter and then strangled her into unconsciousness, or beaten them up simply because they spoke to a girl he was with. And this is the truly ridiculous thing about this type of hero worship. Moat didn't care about anyone but himself, and would have likely killed any of these people who look up to him if they'd have gotten on the wrong side of him. Some hero. Criminologist Professor David Wilson, who, if you've watched enough crime programmes in the UK, you'll likely have come across, penned an opinion piece in the aftermath of Raoul Moat's crimes, and I want to share some of his words as they perfectly encapsulate who this monster was. Quote, "Raoul Moat is a classic case of a violent narcissist with a dangerously twisted view of humanity and a childish determination to impose his will on the world around him. Typical of his eagerness to remain the centre of attention was the 49-page letter he sent to the police trying to explain his monstrous actions. This rambling document, full of dark threats and shallow self-pity, provides a graphic insight into his mentality in all its explosive fury. As a criminologist, I receive missives like this all the time from prisoners. At least once a week, a letter will arrive from a macho thug like Moat, with incoherent passages in which blame passing is mixed with righteous indignation. A strong sense of sentimentality usually shines through the text, as the brute declares his devotion to his children or his ex-girlfriend, but these self-obsessed maniacs have no genuine concern for others. All that matters to them is their own impulses." My thoughts are in line with Professor Wilson, and on a very simplistic level, I would describe Raoul Moat as a giant man baby, a pathetic weak excuse for a man, perpetually aggrieved and terrified. I already commented on the traumatic household that created Moat. He was abused and neglected, and whilst I have a degree of sympathy for him having this type of upbringing, he chose to victimise others when he was an adult, using power and control imposed with violence, and this was the way that he filled the deep dark hole of emptiness inside of him. In order to ensure that women didn't leave him, he abused them, ground them down, tried to destroy who they were, and turn them into an empty shell, someone who didn't love him. They were terrified of him, but as long as they were present and there for him, he didn't care. The man was desperate for attention. Him writing a 49-page rambling screed was like a child jumping up and down, saying "look at me," and his war on the police is almost laughable. This wasn't a war. This was one perpetually aggrieved loser running around with a shotgun. He wanted all the attention, to go down as some sort of warrior, when in fact his pathetic life was really just a fart in the wind. He is one of the people I despise most in the world, the people who, despite their own actions, blame everyone else and will bleat about the police persecuting them, blah blah blah. Here's a hint for you: stop committing crime. Most of us manage to go through our whole lives without any significant contact with the police. As I said earlier in the video, aspects of this case would simply be pathetic if this whole thing wasn't so serious, and that's important to remember, just how violent and savage Raoul Moat was. He abused women and children for years, and despite him having been dead for over a decade, they still have to live with these scars, both physical and mental. Also, due to Moat's actions, Chris Brown, and David Rathband's children have to grow up without their father. I for one believe that the world is a better place without Raoul Moat stealing oxygen from the rest of us. So what are your thoughts on this case? If you like the content, then consider becoming a channel member by clicking the join button. You can also send a one-off payment to support the channel using the thanks button. Please like, share and subscribe. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.